6, establishing the duties and responsibilities of a room rental hosting platform, also known as Airbnb. Let's go around and do introductions. We'll start on this.
Deanna's attorney's office.
Liz Cruz, Treasury.
Dan Moore, Treasurer.
Patrick Flynn.
Albie Gray Jackson.
Dick Traney. Pete Peterson.
John Reynolds.
Jim Steele.
Bill Evans.
Forrest Dunbar.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
And the audience, we'll start here. Position ladies.
Mary Brown from New Jersey.
Good. Back here, please introduce yourself.
Aaron Rainwater, Treasury.
Carl Roskevich, Treasury.
Rose Foley, Assembly Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, I hear you're gonna do the presentation, so you have the floor.
Okay, thanks. I'm gonna just say a couple of things just to start with, and then Bliss is gonna kind of take over from there. Bliss and I were here before this assembly at another work session, about a month ago or so, talking about marijuana sales tax, retail sales tax. Today is a very different subject. It's about room tax. And it's very focused today on what we call hosting platforms. And right now, our current code doesn't really have any provision in there to speak to what the requirements would be of a hosting platform, and we'll describe what we're talking about very, very quickly here. So anyway, the work session that we have planned, we're going to go through these slides that are being handed out right now. It won't take us too long. We'll take questions along the way whenever you want to ask questions, and then we also, I think, have a copy of the ordinance too if you need to see it. So anyway, I'm going to let Liz take over and just start presenting.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you have your packet, if you'd like to turn to the first slide, slide 1. AMC 1220 governs room tax, and the code applies to an operator. And what an operator is a person or entity that owns, operates, or controls a facility that rents a room. The code also authorizes a 12% room tax, and that applies only to short-term rentals. And under the code, that means less than 30 days of continuous occupancy. So the 2016 room tax revenue budget has been set at a little over $27 million. And that revenue is split between general government, the convention center, and tourism promotion. So if you'd like to move over to the right side of the slide, we've included a table which is the current mix of registered operators with Treasury. And it's broken down by market classification. So the economy and mid-market and upper market classifications are really the hotels. And then the small scale operators are the rooming houses, which also includes hostels, and the bed and breakfasts and the vacation rentals. And so the segment of the market that this ordinance focuses on is the bed and breakfast and vacation rental segments. And when you add the total of those two classifications, there's currently 202 registered operators with Treasury right now. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This ordinance was developed because of the tax enforcement I'm sorry.
Can you pause a moment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure, sorry.
With these 202, did we check to see if they're zoned correctly to what they're offering the public? In other words, if they're zoned R1, can they legally run operation renting out a room?
I know that there are zoning requirements that
I wonder
are.
do we check it?
Well, what we do on our website is we have links to what the zoning
Right.
requirements are. If we get a complaint or a whistleblower of some kind, we will refer the case to zoning
Right.
to look into it. Other than that, that's as much as we do in Treasury. Dee might know more.
I did talk to both Erica and to Jack Frost, and just generically, not what we currently do, but the vast majority of these would fall within the correct zoning. So it should not be a zoning issue with us, with very few exceptions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Please continue.
So we're on slide 2. The ordinance was developed because of the tax enforcement challenges involving these small scale operators. They're very difficult to identify and to track the rental activity, and doing so involves a significant amount of administrative efforts by Treasury's tax enforcement officers. And in recent years, these small scale operators have started using internet hosting platforms to rent their rooms. And internet hosting platforms are really a product of modern technology. They've come around in the past several years. They're based on a shared economy model, and they're really an online marketplace. And these platforms actually don't openly disclose the property owner's name or the location of the property to the MOA. So you can't just log in and look up a property and know exactly where it is, know the address of the property owner. That information is not there. And several jurisdictions in many states have actually reached agreements with internet hosting platforms, and you may have heard of Airbnb. That's a big name in this industry right now. They're actually the biggest platform that's out there at this time. And actually Airbnb has some sort of agreement with about a third of the states in the US right now. So some of the bigger places are California, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, and there's many more. So moving on to the next slide. The ordinance before the assembly defines what a hosting platform is and what is required to be in compliance with the code. So as you can see, we've broken down some of the big parts of the new section that we've proposed for the code. The new section focuses on hosting platforms that have formally agreed to collect and remit room taxes to the MOA. There are other entities out there that have not agreed to do that. They haven't agreed to collect and remit the tax, and so we're not talking about those. We're talking about the ones who are voluntarily formally agreeing. And although it is voluntary under the code for a hosting platform to register with the MOA and collect and remit the room tax, we do consider it to be best practices, and it is in alignment with their good corporate citizenship.
I have a question. I'm a little bit confused. Why is it voluntary for somebody to pay his taxes? I don't get that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Under the code, the operators themselves are required by the code, if they're operating, to collect and remit the tax. It's really on the hosting platform being voluntary, because that's the mechanism that these hosts are using just to, as a reservation, advertisement, basically marketplace. So the hosts are still required. Well, the platforms call them hosts, but we call them operators under the code, so that's kind of interchangeable. But the operators are still required under the code to collect and remit the tax no matter what. So if they're using a hosting platform, that's the intention of this particular revision, is to have that hosting platform that agrees to do that on these operators' behalf. And it really consolidates the process. It takes all of these individual people who are required to do all of these things, consolidates them into one entity that's agreed to do that on behalf of the group. So, okay, thank you.
I think, Mr. Jackson, it's also sort of one step at a time. That these hosting platforms are huge, and it's Expedia, it's all these different groups, and we hardly have the ability to tap and enforce compliance at that point. So right now, this is voluntary to follow the host. Our code speaks to operators, which is not what a platform is.
Thank you. I get it now.
Okay.
Please continue.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'd like to move on to slide 4. Under the proposed code, a hosting platform must take several steps to be in compliance. And so we've listed those out here. So they must register with Treasury, they have to provide a financial guarantee, they have to comply with all tax remittance due dates and with reporting requirements, and they also have to preserve transaction records in case we need to audit them. And now the second bullet on this slide is a really key point of this.
Hold on for a minute.
Sure.
Training?
So if they don't, what's the penalty? We hold our breath and we turn liver or what?
If they don't register under the code, or if they
Yeah.
don't,
They're registered under the code.
if they don't register under the code, then it's still the same rules that apply to the individual operators that are required to register under the code, unless they are registered with, unless they use a registered hosting platform, which is actually the second part of this particular slide, that if an operator uses exclusively a registered hosting platform, they are no longer required to do all of those steps individually under the code. The hosting platform basically takes that role on for them.
Thank you for training. Mr. Evans?
Whose responsibility is it the hosting platform doesn't get the money? I guess they take the money out directly, so they always get the money.
Correct. They actually add it as a line item when you first make your reservation, that I have actually looked at some of the other jurisdictions where it's in place already, and they'll have the rent and the cleaning fee, or, you know, whatever your other things are, and then they'll have a line item for the occupancy tax right at that time, and they take that out at the time the reservation is paid for.
And I guess the flip side is that then if for some reason the hosting platform becomes defunct because some other reason doesn't pay us the money, the operator is not responsible.
If the operator is using the hosting platform to do all their bookings, okay, then they're not individually responsible. So the hosting platform, especially if it's a good corporate partner type, like an Airbnb, it actually does a lot for us, the municipality, because they capture this wide umbrella of individual operators, some of which right now do register with us, and some of them are not registered with us. So we're gonna have a much more sort of comprehensive, effective way of gathering this. And if for some reason the hosting platform goes belly up or something happens, we have a financial guarantee for the first 2 years. So we can actually exercise on a bond and make sure we get paid the money that we should have been paid to begin with, so.
I guess you mentioned that Airbnb has agreements with a third of the states approximately. Do they have agreements with individual cities without having agreements with the state?
Yes.
So, and we have reason to believe they would be agreeable, at least that particular platform, to entering into this.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that a little bit, letting you know what we've been doing with Airbnb
Right.
specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very similar question. Have other cities taken this voluntary approach, and what have the results been taking this voluntary approach?
From what we've been able to see, that it is voluntary, and so they actually have on Airbnb's website, they have an entire list of all the different states, broken down under that by the different cities within those states that have agreed, that they've come to this mutual agreement. And then they further gone on to really specify exactly what that means. And they talk about the requirements by that jurisdiction, so, and they really did it from the position where if you're a person making a reservation, you can also go on and understand exactly what it is that you're paying for. So it's very informative if you were to look at that, and it lists it out, and it's very detailed, and it's not even just in the United States, they've done it even in other countries, so it seems like it's the trend, and they're adding more and more to that list.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Do you have any?
I guess just follow up on this, aside from Airbnb, the other ones, VRBO, or I can't remember what it's called exactly, but. yeah,
VRBO.
VRBO, HomeAway, those, have they also been good corporate citizens in the same way in other places with these voluntary schemes?
That part I'm not sure about. We've really been focused more on Airbnb, and we haven't quite moved on to the next step of doing all of the due diligence with all of the other individual entities. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you-
our hope is that if the ordinance passes, if we solidify an agreement with Airbnb, that is gonna be a major cornerstone for future discussions with others
Right.
to try to encourage the same type of approach, so.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Ms. Tucker?
Thank you, Chair. On that due diligence, does that include actually contacting the other municipalities that are maybe listed on the Airbnb to see what it is on their end?
I believe that, well, and actually I have two of my employees here in the audience right now. Carl has actually been really instrumental in working directly with Airbnb, and, do you?
Yeah,
are
I
you
have
talking to-
contacted, as my own due diligence, to ensure that messages of all the people in Anchorage, other cities and other enforcement people, to see what their feeling is about Airbnb, and it seems to be working very well. You have revenue that you haven't gotten before, so it's a win-win-win.
We haven't called all of the jurisdictions, but we have reached out.
Right, a sampling, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, that's great.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Please continue.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just to finalize on slide 4, we did talk about this a little bit, but it is a really important point, that an operator who exclusively uses a registered hosting platform to rent rooms does not have to separately register with Treasury. Okay, so on to slide 5. So for over a year, Treasury has been investigating several of the online hosting platforms who have a presence in Anchorage, and we have listed those out here. We do recognize that there are others out there, and so we're taking a look at those too, but these are definitely more of the big entities in that market. So focusing strictly on Airbnb, Treasury reached out to Airbnb to obtain voluntary compliance for collecting and remitting room tax. And we've been in discussion regarding an agreement for several months now. They've indicated that they need about 2 weeks to configure and implement the process in their website so that they can start collecting and remitting the tax. And Treasury's goal has always been to be ready for the summer season. But during discussions with Airbnb, it quickly became apparent that we needed to do a code revision. And once that happened, we've been involved with the legal department since early on to get to this point.
Mr. Steele?
Can Airbnb, add a surtax, for the cost of providing service to the municipality, collecting the fees, and transmitting them, and who pays that, the client or the municipality? I'm not aware of any additional, fee tacked on by Airbnb. I really do think they feel it's important from their public image to just work with these governments to help collect the tax. So all the hotels that exist now are not reimbursed in any way. They do get the value of holding the money for a quarter, for 3 months at a time. So there is some cash flow benefit there. But it's the same standard we have for all the other hotels.
And Airbnb, just to follow up on that, they do have a line item on their website that is some sort of a charge.
They have a 7% fee, I think, for bookings.
That they charge with their host, so I imagine that they're probably thinking of the administration only
Yeah.
included in that.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Please continue.
Okay, so we want to move on to slide 6. So this ordinance would do several really important things. One, it would level the playing field by bringing currently unregistered short-term operators who use the online hosting platforms into compliance with AMC 1220. It would also increase the room tax revenue to the municipality. And based on Treasury's estimates, the annual hosting platform tax revenue is around $198,000. And just to put that in perspective, that actually makes an entity like Airbnb equivalent to roughly the 40th largest hotel in acreage. And finally, another very important aspect is tax enforcement efforts by Treasury would be much more productive. Efficiency gains would be had because we would not have to process all these numerous tax returns and all this administrative work for all these individuals. We would really be bringing that down into one entity, one known entity, the hosting platform. And that would really gain us quite a bit of efficiency. So moving on to slide 7. This ordinance was introduced at the June 7th Assembly meeting, and it's set for public hearing and hopefully approval at the June 21st meeting. Treasury recommends approval of AO 2016-66 for a couple of very important reasons. It would allow the municipality to finalize the voluntary agreement with Airbnb, and we would then hopefully be able to capture roughly 30 to 40% of the summer revenue from unregistered operators. And so the sooner we can have this ordinance in place, the better it is for us.
Mr. Williams?
Restart question, so do most B&Bs file now, and then we're just getting a few?
Well, based on the information that we have 89 registered B&Bs. And so there's the B&Bs and there's also the vacation rentals. So we know that we have 202 that file now. So we don't know necessarily the full amount of the population. I mean, we see what's shown on a site like Airbnb, it will show the number of rentals, but that's not necessarily equivalent to the number of operators. So, and we don't know how many of those operators are already in this 202, so.
So if someone's going on vacation, a lot of times they'll do, or some people will rent their house for 3 weeks or a month, is that covered by this tax?
Well, as long as if they're renting for more than 30 days consecutive, then it would not be under the code, but any type of short-term rental that's less than 30 days would fall under the provisions of the code.
Certainly.
So when you're doing this whole process and it's coming to us, have you contacted the B&B Association, hotel, whatever, these different groups? Do they know this is coming?
Actually, that's something, so Carl is shaking, you haven't had any direct contact?
Contacted them.
I can chime in. Many, many years ago, we had an issue with bed and breakfast where a lot of them were under radar. And we changed, the assembly approved a change to the code and basically made it so that they actually were required to register, but we forgave their financial guarantee if they were under three
It's
three
three or
years or
less.
under. So that was kind of a compromise, but we did at that time work with a Visit Anchorage and some other groups. There's a Bed and Breakfast Association, and they were very strong in promoting that because they really do want the playing field to be level. There are obviously a number of entities out there, individual operators that use these platforms that are not registered. Right now, 2/3 of all the room operators we have registered, 2/3 of them are these real small operators. If you were to take that dollar amount that's in the SEE, the Summary of Economic Effects, and just do some basic math and make some assumptions, maybe 80 to 100 operators are on platforms and not registered with us. That's about the extent of it, and that's just some rough math we had done. But they're out there, and it is money not only to us, as a city general government. It helps the convention center, and it helps Visit Anchorage if they're the ones promoting the tourism. So it is, I think, for many reasons, I would think it would be widely supported. I don't envision any major opposition. So
I just want to add one more point, that Airbnb in itself is currently mostly operated with one I call company as a black market, which is unregulated. These people are not associated with the E&B industry, which quite frankly manages themselves. They want to be the right citizen, they want to do the right thing, and they work amongst each other. We're talking about mostly the people that are outside of that circle, that are saying, hey, I have an extra room, can I make an extra $100? Sure, go for it, as long as we get the $12.
Thank you, Sarah. Anything else, Mr. Rogers?
No,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Mr. Wilson. Mr. Evans?
For the folks that all of a sudden show up, if this goes forward with Airbnb, that were previously unregistered, but now we're seeing that they're doing this, do they run any risk of us looking at them and saying, prior to July, auditing them or seeing if they're not paying their taxes?
yeah, right now, with Airbnb as an example, if you go online, you really don't know who owns the property and where the property is. It'll still be that way in the future. So if we solidify with Airbnb or other platforms, we're still going to have that same disadvantage of not knowing who it is. So the only way we would know to go after someone potentially is through a neighbor or a competitor or somebody saying, can you check this out? And anytime we get those tips, we do follow up on them. But that's really hit and miss. This is not going to open the door to a whole bunch of past audits, and we really frankly don't have the resource to do a bunch of past audits. And these are little operators, small operators. Typically, when we do audits, we may do a few random small operators, but we're focusing on the bigger exposure, bigger properties typically. So,
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, two questions. One, sort of following up on what Mr. Weldon was speaking, people do these swaps. You get my house for 3 weeks, I get your house for 3 weeks, kind of thing. That wouldn't be covered. We don't govern that. Carl raised his hand. We don't worry about that, right?
It's a barter transaction, which is already covered under this code.
Okay.
So the value of exchange, the person that does those swaps
Yeah.
are required to remit the taxes based on the value of exchange. There's such programs out there all the time, and they work in a great area.
yeah,
And their segment is their market.
Right.
A lot of it is, can we even discover the
Yeah.
activity?
Okay.
So.
Okay, I heard my answer even if you didn't say it. Okay.
Okay.
The second part follows up on Mr. Evans. I've used various sites to find places to rent when I go on vacation, and I find that some of them are essentially fronts for more organized entities. You call the number of the owner, and it's really a vacation management, property management company. Other times you actually get the owner. My assumption is people who are doing this are probably using multiple platforms to market their property. Maybe they're on Craigslist, maybe they're on Airbnb, maybe they're on, I don't know, whatever some of them was listed. So I think you made the comment that if someone is exclusively marketing through Airbnb, then they don't have to register independently. That seems to create a,
Through a registered platform.
Right.
It could be several platforms that are registered with us, and if they choose to register through 3 or 4 of them, that's fine. But if they do some other types of arrangements that are not through a registered platform, that continues to subject them to individual responsibility to register with us and to pay the tax and do all those other things that come along with it.
well, the other part of that was you said they're relieved of liability of non-collection. Seems to me that they would have liability if they're.
For the portion they do that is outside of a hosting platform.
Only for the, okay,
Yeah.
I better reread this because I didn't catch that. All right, I'll check again.
Thank you, Mr.
I think
Ms. Ennis,
Carl
you
wanted to hop
did
up.
you have a comment?
Bottom line is, if you're 100% doing Airbnb, then
You got no
you
words.
rely on the controls of Airbnb. But at the end of the day, if you're stealing at $12, the taxes follow the property. So one way or another, the people are going to generate the money.
And also, if I may, just to say that one of the provisions in the new code, it's actually, under section 2, 1220.031G, and it actually shows up on page 3. The last sentence there says, to the extent a hosting platform remits taxes on behalf of an operator, the operator's liability for those taxes shall be deemed satisfied. So if the hosting platform is not remitting taxes on behalf of the operator, then the operator is still liable for those taxes.
Well, then maybe I misunderstood. I don't read that as saying that the property owner is therefore relieved of the burden. If for some reason, where does it say if the hosting platform fails to remit the taxes, they're somehow relieved of that? This says to the extent they remit it, you're fine. If they don't, what happens? And you said earlier, I thought, if you are working through that hosting platform and they collect the taxes on your behalf, you're fine. I don't read that in here. Maybe is it a different section?
The intent there is to talk about.
I know intent. I'm looking for words.
Yeah. The hosting platform has consequences if they do not remit to us. And they're remitting in the name of the properties they represent.
I respect that. Okay. I'll read the sentence one more time. Top of page 3. To the extent a hosting platform remits taxes on behalf of an operator, the operator's liability for those taxes shall be deemed satisfied. The follow-on sentence should be, to the extent a hosting platform collects taxes on behalf of an operator, and the hosting platform does not remit taxes to the municipality, what happens? And I want that what happens filled in.
Okay, let's ask.
Well, I mean, I think it is implied exactly what we're saying, that if the hosting platform doesn't remit the taxes, then the operator is not relieved of that tax burden. If we were to write anything else in it, almost encourage bad acting by the hosting platform. So in other words, if the operator is the small person owning their house that submits taxes to a voluntary compliance hosting platform, and then that group does not turn the money over to us, I don't know how we could say that the operator then is therefore not liable, or.
Well, why should they? They didn't do anything wrong. I mean, you already said we have a 2-year surety bond, we're gonna get our money anyway.
Yeah.
So why are we leaving the operator out there hanging if they've done everything we asked them to do?
That might be a.
Here's what I suggest. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. I suggest that you have a conversation and work on this with Mr. Flynn when the work session is over. That's my suggestion. And Carl, why don't you join us up front in case you have, some more comments that you need to make or ask? Thank you. Mr. Steele?
Aaron is my partner.
Carl, just a few years, if you want to speak, raise your hand so somebody, chairman can call in. That's what we do here, we just don't call in comments. But they're recognized.
Well, sometimes.
Mr. Steele, do you have a comment?
No.
Mr. Steele,
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I'm not familiar with these companies, Airbnb or furnishing your house, traveling and and they sometimes require exclusivity, so if you advertise on their platform, they're the only ones that can market your, rooms or whatever. Does anyone know that?
I'm not sure.
Airbnb does not.
Does not.
That was their, this language was their provision in our contract.
Thanks. Okay, we have 25 more minutes. Does anybody have any more questions you'd like to ask? Okay, well, seeing no other questions. Ms. Ennis, did you, I'm sorry, Mr. Dunbar?
Oh, no, I was just making a brief comment. This is the first time I've ever requested a work session. I want to thank you for accommodating me, and I want to thank the administration for presenting on it. I'm well satisfied.
You're welcome, Mr. Dunbar.
No, yeah, I used it.
And just one comment, the administration mentioned the fact that you want to see us pass this on Tuesday. I'm not sure we're gonna have enough votes, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you.